Swann and add all of your credentials and letters, of course, as always.
Okay. My name is Mike Swann. I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I'm also a nationally certified counselor, a certified rehabilitation counselor, and a licensed practical nurse.
And you are based in the Seattle area.
Yeah.
And we've done some work together with the NAACP and on webinars and things like that. So, and often we've gotten into some real, I think, essential conversations. I like to call them essential because
Mhm.
working in DI, DI has always had a fair amount of pushback anyway, but lately it seems like especially in the last couple of years, I think especially since the George Floyd thing kind of died down. When George Floyd got killed, and then there was Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, and then all of a sudden, the racism that's been in the country the whole time really got the spotlight put on it. And some people were like really shocked, like, oh my goodness, I thought we'd come so far and we had Barack Obama and all this other stuff. And now I'm seeing Black Lives Matter and what's going on and all this other stuff. And now it's kind of died down because maybe Black people aren't getting killed by law enforcement or whatever. But there's a real pushback against DEI right now. It's considered, well, it's divisive, bringing up all this stuff from the past, and why can't people just be colorblind and just treat people as individuals? So why, for you, why is DEI so critical to in the workplace, but also in people's personal lives?
Well, I think for several reasons. One is because I think DEI is crucial to helping to preserve the mental well-being of folks in marginalized groups. Um, there's a significant lack of representation at certain echelons of executive leadership in jobs, for example. Microsoft has very significant lack of diversity in its upper echelons. That they're a technically a local corporation here in the Seattle area, and they have significant lack of diversity in their upper echelons. And when you have that situation happening, that tends to have a trickle down effect to the folks in lower echelons of the company. So the people on the front lines, the people who are, at the front end of the company. And we see that amongst many different echelons in many different industries, not just Microsoft. We see it in the nonprofit sector. I saw it in my time working in nonprofits. We see it in even the mental health sector. Whereas these folks that are at the top, there's less diversity the more you go up in the hierarchy of organizations. So having a DEI department in these organizations, especially major organizations, helps to balance out that imbalance, essentially. We also look at the fact that things like affirmative action have been done away with, declared unconstitutional. We also talk about, for example, Florida. They are decreasing and eliminating their DEI positions and reallocating, and also legislation that is being produced in states like Florida and Texas that attack the rights of women and affect families. Anti-abortion legislation, anti-gender inclusivity legislations. Doing the same thing in North Carolina. They have a guy who's running for governor of North Carolina who says there's only two genders. So we see the intersectionality of race, class, gender at the highest levels of both government and corporate America, and how it's having effects on the rest of people. I mean, there's insurance companies out there that won't cover certain services like gender affirming care for folks because or abortion coverage for folks because of their own beliefs, and this creates an environment of marginalization and discrimination that extends again in an intersectional manner that that affects race, class, and gender. So we're seeing this happening, and having a DEI core of professionals that are focused on this and can help serve as the glue in these corporate structures can help to mitigate some of the backlash from this.
Mm.
DEI organizations, DEI workers can help to promote cohesiveness and help to provide a sense of connection between the worker and management that otherwise wouldn't be there. So that's one of the reasons why I think DEI is so important. As a counselor, one of the things that I see very often with clients, especially folks who work in high stress fields like the tech industry and the healthcare industry, is that there is an inherent feeling of discrimination that they have, us versus them type of mindset with these different entities, and that can create some feelings of isolation, feelings of, oh well, these people don't care about me, why should I care about them? And then it becomes us versus them, and then it becomes contentious. I see this all the time in my practice. So it's definitely something's there, that's there. It's definitely something that is existing, and to deny it, in my opinion, is kind of denying the basis of human nature, right? Human beings, in my opinion, rationality, rational thought is not something that just formulates. Irrational thought is more natural than rational thought a lot of times. So we need organizations to embrace DEI, to embrace equality, to embrace inclusion, because given to our own devices, we sometimes we will automatically go into discrimination. I mean, take prison, for example. You go into prison, you're a prison inmate. Guess what happens? You're sorted by race. You ask any former prisoner, if you go into prison, most of the time, and I don't like to speak in absolutes, but this is, and I've counseled folks who've been to jail. I've done it over the last 6.5 years. They will sort you by race. And if you do something to go against another race, it becomes tribal. Violence often can happen. So as human beings, we naturally look at people who look at us and we see them as allies. And we look at people who don't look at us, look like us. We naturally see them as non-allies. That's part of human nature. If you deny that, go hang out in a prison for a few months. You'll see that. You'll see that establishment. So that's why we need DEI. We need DEI to help find order in the chaos of human nature.
Well, you've touched on so many things here. I'm trying
Yeah.
to think of where I want to start. I mean, the last thing you said about just kind of being sorted by race, and if somebody doesn't fit into your tribe or doesn't, think like you or look like you or dress like you or have the same religion as you, it's interesting because I hear so many people that want to pretend that doesn't exist.
Mhm.
They want to be colorblind, and then they bring out the MLK quote about content of character and all this other stuff. I
Yeah.
mean, MLK said a lot of things that they don't even know about that,
Mhm.
but they go to the content of character because it lets them off the hook, basically.
Yeah.
But and then what happens is, I mean, just recently I forced myself to read some rather disturbing and just outright, I don't know, disgusting websites where trans people were being painted as child molesters,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's so,
Mhm.
when you were talking, I was thinking at the core of this human nature thing, a lot for me is a lot of times it's fear,
Mhm.
because if for me, I'm not you, I'm not a therapist, but
Yeah.
in my mind, I'm thinking, if something isn't threatening me, then why do I care? It's like if two gay people want to get married, how does that affect my life? But then what happens is I hear some of these kind of hate mongers who say, well,
Mhm.
if you let this happen, then
Yeah.
before you know it, something worse is going to happen. So it's kind of like
Exactly.
if it's like the whole thing with the border,
Mhm.
depending on who you talk to. I talked to one person, oh, the border's not much going on. I read somewhere else, oh, there's like thousands of illegals pouring through the border every day. Well, they can't both be true. But I think we live in a time where people can't come right out and say, I don't like black people or I don't like gay people. They have to kind of create this justification for being polarized by saying, well, it's not that I don't like gay people, but I read this
Mhm.
article about how, they do this, 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 and this. And if we're not careful, they're going to turn all of our, elementary school kids gay. So, I mean, it
Yeah.
just gets really
Yeah.
over the top sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. So we talk about our cognitive distortions, and one of the things we talk about is catastrophizing, worst case scenario, black and white thinking. If this person did it, then we all do it. If I allow my son or my daughter to learn about gender fluidity or gender expression, then they're gonna all of a sudden turn non-binary. Like it's just like a switch that you flip on, and that happens, right? People think that way, and that's not the case. I can't tell you how many times I've heard of stories where, you know, kids even approach topics of gender inclusivity at their schools, and it's a protest. It's a, oh, we can't do that. And I would say the great rapper Nas, he has a quote in one of his songs: people fear what they don't understand, hate what they can't conquer. Guess that's just the theory of man. And I live that verse all the time when I'm working with clients. It's like, if you don't look like me, you don't act like me, you don't think like me, you're not from my small town with the one stop sign and the one mailbox, then you're an other. You're nobody. You're this, you're that. I mean, America is a big country. It's one of the biggest countries in the world. And there's a lot of people out there who don't leave their town. There's a lot of people who don't leave their state, don't leave, they don't leave their intersection. And so when we have that, this is what creates the ignorance. This is what creates the lack of diversity, the homogeneity of certain towns. And that's what leads to discrimination. You don't look like me, therefore, you are not as good as us. Who are you? The whole concept of sundown towns. I mean, sundown towns still exist. You go on TikTok right now and you search sundown towns, and they're still out there. And
And
you
this is
think,
where,
how?
just for our, just to, for clarification for our listeners and viewers, this is a place, and historically, black people had to leave certain towns before
Yeah.
sundown. I mean, they could work in the town, they could
Hmm.
even maybe stop and get some gas, but by sundown,
Yeah,
you had to be on the other side of the tracks, basically.
absolutely. Absolutely. Sundown towns still exist in certain parts of the country. And it's like, you look at this and you go, oh, well, still, it doesn't affect me. And I'm like, at this point, I'm not trying to scare people into saying that everybody is just this and that, but it's like we have to be mindful. We have to be present with this, and we have to be able to speak to this. I would give anybody the test right now, and I do this because I want to give it this test. If you don't think there is a need for DEI at your job, if you go into an office, just bring in a book that encourages anti-racism. For example, the book How to Be an Anti-Racist is a great work. Big fan of it. I recommend it to folks all the time. Bring that into your office and see what people say. If people come up to you and they say, "Oh, there's no problems. Why are you reading? Why are you reading this? There's no racism." Then that's an example of colorblind racism, and that is racism. To say that there isn't a problem is a problem. Now, if they come up to you and say, "You know what? I'm glad you're reading that book. I too am concerned with racism. I want to support you and your goals to understand discrimination." Then they too might be an anti-racist, which is what we want. We want anti-racism to help spread that and help kind of reduce discrimination out there. So that's kind of a litmus test, I would say to folks. If you can go and have an open conversation about race with people and not feel uncomfortable with it, then you might have people who are encouraging and helpful. I'll give you an example. So my book club, I've been a part of a book club for about 4 or 5 years. And one of the things we did, we had a discussion about African American literature. I talked about W.E.B. Du Bois, talked about Afrofuturism, and my book club folks, uh, they were all on it. They were super appreciative, and it was very, as the only black person in this group, all of my other book club members were white. It was really uplifting for me, and this was a few months after George Floyd. It was really uplifting for me to know that they had that kind of support. They weren't like, "Oh, what's this? this doesn't make any sense. Why are you doing this? No, they were right there supporting me. And that's the environment that we want to see. We want to be able to embrace that and see like what people's thoughts are on race without being dismissive of it. Because it's almost like if you're dismissive of it, it's almost like you're walking around with your head in the sand, to be honest, which
Or
is in my
someplace
opinion
else, actually.
worse. Well, yeah, exactly. In my opinion, it'd be worse than, you know, not addressing it. So
Right. Well, sometimes I feel more frustrated in some ways with somebody
mhm,
who's just in denial than somebody who's just a flat out racist sometimes, because at
yeah,
least if they're a flat out racist, I know exactly where they're coming from. And in some cases, there could even be a discussion because sometimes the racism comes from some lived experience or it could come from influences growing up. I mean, I don't know how many people have that I've talked to who are adults now have grown up in racist households,
yeah,
where their parents are always at the dinner table, or always talking about Mexicans and black people
mm,
and all this other stuff. And in some households, the children rejected it, or at least got out of that echo chamber, and went to college maybe, or did some traveling and went, wow, this isn't true what my parents have been saying. Now others who stayed in that little bubble get
mhm,
it's almost like an infection, kind of get infected with this
yeah,
way of thinking, so
yeah,
that, yeah, if you've been told all your life that, be afraid of black males or something like that, then of
mhm,
course that's going to embed itself in your psyche. But
right,
I'd rather deal with somebody like that, because then that's concrete. What I really hate is when somebody just is dismissive and, oh no, that doesn't exist, or they find the one black person out of I don't know how many millions of black people are in the country that
yeah,
agrees with them and said, well, see, Mike Swann, my black neighbor,
mhm,
said that he doesn't mind if somebody does blah, 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 blah. And I'm thinking, now, if I said, hey, I talked to one white person and that white person represents the other
mhm,
100 million white people that are in the country, people think I'm crazy. That's ridiculous.
yeah,
But a lot of the other narrow-minded people that I run into, they like to use that. Well, my brother-in-law is Mexican, so I can't be racist.
yeah, yeah, yeah. We talk about the concept of confirmation bias too. So like just because this one person is like this, then they're all like this. And that is also a discriminatory practice, and I think for me, now I've worked from home for the last 3 years, and so I don't work with other than my clients. I don't really and just people online. I don't really work with anybody in person anymore. But you can definitely tell the energy when you're working with someone who may be discriminatory,
Yeah, I
right?
want to hear about that.
I've had to deal with some things at work, not to get too super into it,
Sure.
but there's been some instances where I felt uncomfortable. And as a person of color, it's kind of like, you know, what do I do with that? How do I address that in a workplace setting? And this is where DEI comes in. Because without DEI, how do you address that? What happens when you address that?
There's well, there's no place to go. It's kind of
Exactly.
like if your car is running out of gas and you can't find a gas station. He said, if I could
Hmm.
just find a gas station, I wouldn't have this issue. But you're right. I mean, I've had clients that I've worked with, or organizations I've been a part of, that are
Hmm.
scared of DEI. But instead of saying, but they'll have the thing on the website and they have the nice mission statement, and that they, kind of a generic, we embrace all people from backgrounds. But when it really comes down to it, they really don't want to touch it, because for one thing, sometimes they're afraid of,
Yeah.
at least in their own mind, repercussions. Like, well, what will some of our staff members think? What will some of our funders think? And all of these kind of, notions of doom and dread that come into that. But if you do at least have a DI program, there's some place to go where,
Yeah.
first of all, I think you can get some validation, because there's so much gaslighting going on and microaggressions that, you have that one person of color going around scratching their head, going, now wait a minute, I think things just aren't really right here, but I can't put my finger on it. And if I bring it up, it's like, oh, come on, Mike, you're being oversensitive or something like that. but at least the
Yeah.
DEI program can keep banging the drum and holding, hopefully, the leadership accountable. Like, okay, you've got 6 employees over here that are upset because
Mhm.
they feel their supervisor is biased. Now,
Yeah.
you might not want to accept that, but you better do something about it, because in a lot of cases, when you hear about these lawsuits where, I think Tesla's got a class action lawsuit, like 6,000 black people or something are suing them,
Oh, wow.
or 3,000, I think. But the
Okay.
point, it's like an infection. What happens if you get infected and you just ignore the first symptoms? Well, later on, you're going to wish you hadn't ignored it, because now you're
Yeah.
you're in court, or your leg is falling off.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a trickle down effect. Absolutely. And it just kind of it's a reflection of the leadership too.
Yes.
I'm not big into Tesla and things like that. I have friends that own Teslas, but we know, there's some things going on with that company and the ownership, and hopefully they find peace with what they're doing. But I would rather have a DEI department that's dedicated to, at the bare minimum, mediation,
Hmm.
conflict resolution. I mean, that alone, an unbiased conflict resolution mediation group within a large company to help save that money, right? And
Hmm.
some people might think, well, DEI, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. I mean, how many DEI related incidents are you going to have at a company? My thoughts are, if you have a company of at least 25 employees or more, do you really expect there not to be any conflicts within that company that involve discriminatory practice over the life of that company? Do you
Or
really think,
bias, just
yeah,
interpersonal interaction, where it might even be
mhm,
a case where, I have the basis for a real lawsuit. But if I'm working with you and you have an attitude and you're throwing out microaggressions every so often, well, that's a problem.
yeah,
Because sometimes I think people get very narrow-minded and think, well, we're not being sued, so we don't have to
mhm,
worry about this. But do you really want to work with somebody who you feel doesn't like you, doesn't respect you, thinks they're
yeah,
better than you? Who would want to work with someone like that?
exactly. And I think one of the things that I feel like is an obstacle that people look at is that DEI is this kind of unitasker like entity within a company. DEI, in my opinion, can have a positive influence in most aspects of a company, right? Public relations, conflict management, uh, 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 business development, even
Recruitment.
recruitment. Exactly. It,
Uh,
it, it it's to me, it's kind of like the grease that keeps the wheel going, which is why I'm excited about it. I talk up DEI all the time because it's like you kind of need it. I mean, you definitely need it. I mean, without DEI, some of these companies wouldn't even exist, in my opinion.
like
You know?
changing your oil. I mean, what happens when you don't change the oil when you're supposed to? It gums up, it gets thin, and then all of a sudden your engine freezes up on the
Yeah,
freeway. I did want to talk about this one thing
yeah,
about the toll that it takes on mental health. And so you're a person in the gay community, or you're a person of color or whatever, and say dealing with microaggressions, you're dealing with lack of respect, you bring something up, or maybe you write something and it gets changed and watered down, or something like that, depending on your position. Do you see, like, even with your clients, people coming in and going, God, this is wearing me down, or
yeah.
the
All
effects
the
of
time,
racism?
all the time, all the time. It is one of the most prominent issues I deal with in my practice. And not to get into specifics, but it is something that is at the forefront. It's one of the reasons why people come to me because I might understand because I'm a person of color.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish it wasn't. I wish we didn't need DEI. I honestly wish we didn't need any of this stuff, but in all reality, we do. And, you know, now it's up to me to understand the perception versus the reality and things like that. And we do that. We do that work. That's important. How much is this really affecting me? What happens to me as a result of this, right? How does this affect how I'm able to function at work and outside of work? We do that evaluation, but for the most part, it has racial discrimination, intersectionality, race, class, gender, discrimination. It has a direct effect on someone's well-being as well as their performance at work. And it can cause anxiety and cause significant depression, substance use, um, PTSD related symptoms. We've seen that, people having nightmares, people having flashbacks, people avoiding certain groups at their workplace because of racialized trauma. This happens way more than it needs to, and this is why DEI is so important to help bridge the gap and help to clarify things. Right? People make so many assumptions about other groups just based off of anecdotal evidence, he said, she said stuff, hearsay, and DEI helps to clarify and helps to hopefully work through some of that just misinformation that's out there. Which is why this is why I think it's so important. DEI not only in the workplace but also educational institutions. That's a
Mhm.
big one. In all educational institutions, just because you're HBCU doesn't mean there's no DEI related incidents. Being an HBU doesn't make you immune from that. Everybody, every department, every college, in my opinion, should have some form of DEI training on a regular basis to not only the faculty, but also the students. Students should receive some sort of DEI training that allows for them to understand any discrimination, any harassment policies, inclusivity policies within the school. Because again, you've got kids that are coming from homes that maybe DEI isn't even a concept. Maybe they didn't even see anybody that wasn't their color their entire time growing up.
Oh, absolutely.
What
Yes.
happens when you go to a school and you've only seen people that look like you your entire life? You're 18 years old. You got 18 years of potential discriminatory concepts and thoughts built up in your mind that now you're unleashed to the world, this heterogeneous environment wherever, you
Well,
know?
and then on top of it, and I go back to Black Lives Matter, for instance. I mean,
Yeah.
during that period of time, I know people personally that live in some of these areas where it's devoid of any kind of diversity, really. And
Yeah.
I'm not blaming people for living
Mhm.
there. But then when Black Lives Matter comes up and your 12-year-old turns on the TV and you see protests and Black Lives Matter, well, this might as well be, alien language being spoken
Yeah.
because they haven't been connected with any of that kind of lived experience or really interacted with anyone. So
Yeah.
it's confusion. So it's really up to parents. I mean, I believe DEI or some form of it needs to be in the elementary school system
Yeah.
because
Absolutely.
kids there's we all they got to do is turn the TV on and if they listen to CNN or any number I mean they're going to go what in the world is going on in my little world. Everybody's happy and we live on the farm and what is all this stuff? And so then at some point, if somebody doesn't address it and help them, in a compassionate way, learn about this, then they go out into the world and they wind up being vice president of some company. And because they had no lived experience and nobody wanted to expose them to something, then they have tremendous blind spots. I think that's one thing as a consultant I run into quite a bit. And it's not always white leadership, but in a lot of cases, it's not that they're bad people, but they have no concept. So they go out and write editorials or they go out and do things with these blind
Yeah.
spots. And then they're totally confused when their
Yeah.
people are offended and even in churches, I see it. I've seen some awful
Mhm.
sermons
Yeah.
where they're basically, trying to, for some reason, they need to point out that the slaves got some job skills while they happen to be slaves, and I'm like, well, that's totally irrelevant.
Yeah. Slavery was a 400-year job training
Yeah,
program.
I mean, it's like, so what? It reminds me of,
Unbelievable.
I know a lot of trafficking survivors, sex trafficking survivors, and they'll tell me, hey, I had a pimp for 5 years, okay, and yeah, he took me out to some nice dinners.
Yeah.
He bought me some nice clothes. He bought me a new car, and if I tried to leave, he'd kill me. So
Mhm.
who cares about the dinners and the
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
nice clothes? It's irrelevant. But yet
Exactly.
I see these people with these blind spots that don't know how much they're hurting people because they just and then when they had the chance to listen, it's, oh well, I'm not racist.
Right.
I think everybody's great. So what
Exactly.
happens? The cycle just kind of continues in the workplace and in people's personal lives.
It's almost like I'm thinking about a metaphor. So my wife is she's an amazing cook. She's way better cook than me. And she knows how to poach eggs. She knows how to do everything. It's almost like you're poaching an egg, right? You take that egg and you put it in that boiling water or whatever you do with it. If you don't put it in just right, it's going to get way too hard. It's not going to work. If you don't put it in long enough, it's going to be runny. It's not going to be what you want it to be. That's the same way with folks coming out of their institutions, right? If you're at a in a town where it's 500 people in one stoplight, maybe you haven't cooked enough.
Mm.
Maybe you haven't boiled enough. So now you get onto the plate, you get into the real world, you get into college, maybe you go somewhere else. You're this undercooked egg. And everybody's looking at you like, what is going on with this person? This is why we have the Karen syndrome, right? We see all these Karens around. We see all these videos and all this and that. You see these people that are just kind of, a little bit out there. And it's just like, what's going on? And that's upbringing. Albert Bandura talked about the social learning theory, and he talked about how people interact with their environment, how people interact with their world, and they learn through observation. And if your observation growing up was, okay, these people are all like me, other people bad, our people good, that tribalism, that inherent tribalism that exists in everyone, and you go into a world where it's like, hey, we don't really think like that, then yeah, that's going to take some time to unlearn. And that's why we need DEI to help guide people along that path if they didn't get that understanding, or if they choose to ignore diversity. Because some people do that. They just out and out deny it. And then you get this thing called cognitive dissonance that kicks in, another great psychological term. So if they see something that goes against their core beliefs and it creates that discomfort, that can cause issues as well. Oh, I'm feeling uncomfortable with this person who's different than me. I'm going to start problems with them.
Well, yeah, or they will rely on the old well, I have a gay neighbor, and my
Yeah.
coworker's black, and
Mhm.
my boss is in a wheelchair, therefore I don't there's nothing I need to learn. Or I
Yeah.
voted for Obama, so I don't need to listen to anything. But what would you just leave our viewer listeners with in terms of if they really, okay, they're an ally. I want to be an ally. I'm
Yeah.
white, or it doesn't have to even be a white person. Just I want to be an ally and be open to actually making a change, or making change happen, so to speak. What's your advice to a person like that?
That's a good question. I would say, first of all, listen. If there's a person of color in your friend group and you are a white person, and they tell you that they're feeling uncomfortable at work, or they're feeling uncomfortable in their personal life because of possible discrimination, we need to listen. We need to hear what they have to say, and we need to validate. We need to validate what they have to say. We need to give them that space to say what they need to say. And we need to encourage them to take action if they need to, right? People aren't, you know, I like to look for the good. So we talk about unconditional positive regard. People aren't all bad, and life isn't all bad. But if it is bad, we need to look at it. We need to focus on it. We don't dismiss it, right? We don't excuse it. Oh, well, that's just how it is, right? He grew up on a farm. There was a comedian. He made a joke about that. Oh yeah, he just grew up on a farm. What are the farm animals racist? Right? Where'd you get that from? So we need to acknowledge that that exists. And we also don't need to be afraid of talking about racial discrimination and the need for DEI in our workplace. Ask your boss, ask your HR department, hey, what's the DEI policy when you start your job? Or if you've been there for a little bit, maybe you take a look at your manual, right? Take a look at your policies. When was the last time you had a class on DEI policy at your job? What's that policy look like? Is there a DEI committee? Now, some people criticize committees as kind of superficial and facetious. However, go take a look. If you feel like it's not of substance, what can we do to address that? In order to work around and address DEI related issues, we have to be able to be comfortable with the thought of taking action, even if that just means going to the DEI committee meeting or going to a presentation and reading the manual and saying, okay, I got it. I'm good. That's better than putting your head in the sand and saying, "Oh no, well, my uncle's cousin's sister is black, so I'm not a racist." That's way easier than that. I mean, that's the bare minimum. Read your company policy. Be mindful of your friends if they're feeling discriminated or feeling marginalized, and check out a meeting or two.
Hmm.
You know, I mean, that's the bare minimum. I mean, I'm not telling you to go, you don't have to go and join NAACP, but I mean, if the spirit moves you, go for it. You don't have to go and protest in City Hall, but if the spirit moves you, go for it. I'm just saying, just be informed and
Hmm.
be validating of the people around you and listen. That's a great place to start. Nobody's expecting you to be the next MLK. There's only one, you know.
Right, and that's yeah, that's a great way to end this particular conversation because we have a
Yeah,
series of these, and I know we'll have some more on different aspects of what we've been talking about. But I guess with your words, what strikes me is that change does not come about unless there's some action taken. I
yeah,
mean, I don't know how many people I've known, and it's not that they're bad people, but they'll say something like, well, racism is bad. I'm not racist. I just treat everybody nice, which is good. Yeah, I treat everybody as an individual. That's wonderful. But if Martin Luther King had just been sitting on his sofa, looking at the
yeah,
segregation and Rosa Parks getting arrested and all this other stuff,
yeah,
segregated schools and lynchings, and said, well, that's just wow, that sucks really. But I'm going to go back to my coffee here and I'm just going to treat people
exactly.
nice. It doesn't change anything. People unfortunately have to go out and
Mhm.
protest, or they have to boycott, or they have to make a stink, or they have to show up at their city council meeting and say,
Yeah,
this isn't acceptable. They have to call it out. Otherwise, it doesn't change. And
yeah,
then the burden falls on the target of the bias or the racism or the homophobia or whatever to
yeah,
like shake it off. Well, Mike, don't let it bother you. That's just the
mhm,
way it is. He grew up on a farm. So
yeah,
with that,
yeah,
I'll end this particular conversation. Thank you, Michael Swann.
yeah, no problem.